Welcome to another episode of The Digital's Growthcast, the podcast where we explore the latest in web design, digital marketing, and business growth strategies. I'm Keri Rosemond at The Digital, an award-winning web design and digital marketing agency based in Raleigh, North Carolina. Joining us virtually today is Versaviya, founder of Pivot Branding, a company dedicated to helping businesses bridge the gap between messaging and design. With her extensive marketing experience, Versaviya specializes in using strategic visual storytelling to help brands maximize their ROI by focusing on their audience's problems and how to solve them. Whether you need an investor deck, lead magnet, or messaging framework, her expertise helps businesses cut through the clutter, sharpen their message, and drive growth.
So, Versaviya, super excited to have you on our episode of the Growthcast today. We have a bunch of really great questions that we're excited to hear your thought process and your methodical approach to helping companies really brand and really position themselves better in the market. I think it always sounds great if you could give us like a little bit of like your background and what made you kind of jump into this profession, and then we'll go from there.
For sure, yeah, I'm super excited to be here. Storytelling is my jam, so anytime someone asks me questions about it, oh, you're gonna hear, nonstop talk. So I'm super excited to tell you all about it. I started my journey in video production, actually, and that is what really gave me an appreciation for storytelling and also editing down tons of information into like very short snippets and condensing that down to only what you need. So I was from the start hardwired for clarity and for editing down information to something that people can understand quickly. And nowadays, in today's world, speed is king. You have to be able to communicate quickly because people are not going to sit around trying to decipher your message. You have to be able to, explain it very, very quickly. So that's really where I began. And then I continued over the next few years, got my degree in advertising and moved more towards a branding, advertising, marketing world. And I really just dove into the world of graphic design and found a place there to apply that storytelling and that editing technique. And so when I started my business, I first started in logo design because I feel like that's where most designers begin. They're like, yo, let me start logo design. That's the most like obvious place to start, right? But as I continued, kind of pivoting myself, I found that where my skills are most valuable are in homepage design and pitch deck design because both of those things really require very strong messaging, which I've always enjoyed and always loved to do, design and the editing aspect of condensing information down. So that's really where I found my sweet spot. I always say I felt like a cat, like just like finding my space, finding where I'm most useful, and that's really where I found my comfort zone and my I guess value zone of where I can apply the most value. That was my main goal from starting my business. I want to provide value to people wherever I end up, and so far this is the best fit that I found.
I love that. And yeah, just the ability to connect with people and really understand their needs and strengthen their brand. I mean, that's awesome. Whenever you can blend a passion with a role that, you can monetize is always just, fulfillment in every way possible. And then watching that brand transform is just that sense of gratification. Like, yes, we did this.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, I've worked with many brands that when I first meet the business owner, they are just in this cloud of overthinking, overwhelm, and talking with them. What I like to do is just first hear them out completely and then find what I call that golden thread of information that's in there somewhere. It's in all of that chaos, but you have to be able to find that and highlight just that one part of their story and cut the rest. I'm an editor at heart. I like to cut, cut, cut. And so that's really where I start is like, what do we not need to talk about? Because if you're educating someone on something, it's very expensive. It's very expensive to educate your audience, anyone on anything. And so why would you spend your energy, your money, your time educating someone on something that they don't need to know? So that's really where I begin, is first cut what you don't need. And then how do we highlight the remaining story to be as beautiful visually and verbally as well, so that they can understand it quickly.
Wow, yeah. And as you're talking, I'm just thinking about, how what you're saying just really goes in hand with like once you've established your brand and your mission statement and how you want to position your brick and mortar location or, extremely online, whatever your organization or business is, you get that branding aligned and then it helps in getting that brand awareness out, whether it's search engine optimization and providing further relevant content. So you can be a subject matter expert in the eyes of search engines and things like that. But a lot of times people put the cart before the horse. And so really making sure that even at a ground level in a company and you're ready to invest in your digital presentation, let's make sure that the website is sharpened up and who we are and what we do is really front and center.
Yeah, exactly. And part of that is also, why would you spend so much money? Because marketing is expensive. People spend thousands, if not millions of dollars on marketing. And if you are spending all of that money marketing a confusing message that people don't understand, then, you know, rest in peace for all that money lost, you know? So that's really where I like to explain my value to business owners, because it always starts from a place of like, okay, you're investing in marketing to get a return. You're not just investing to make it look pretty and then sit back and enjoy it. You want a return on your money. And that's one of the biggest benefits to clarifying your message, is you're only marketing what you need to, that core message that's going to get conversions, not any other fluff out there that's getting in the way of that.
Mm,
So when
yes.
you're working with businesses and to helping them to clarify their message, is there some kind of framework that you use or a formula that you use? How do you get down to that golden thread?
I sure do. I'm actually Storybrand certified. So what that means is Storybrand is a framework. So it starts with incorporating storytelling in your marketing. And if you don't know, storytelling is the most powerful way for humans to communicate. And it's for that reason that humans have been using it for so long. It's an ancient technique to communicate information, and not just communicate it, but make it stick. Because if you think back in your life, you don't think in facts, numbers, logistics. You think of stories, emotions, and feelings that you've had in your life. So it only makes sense to tap into that, the power of storytelling, into your marketing as well, because at the end of the day, we're humans. We want to communicate on a human level. And so if all you're talking about are statistics and specs and how cool your product is, no one's going to remember that. So what I like to do is help people shift their mindset, so they're not talking about themselves. How often do you go to a party and then you get stuck in a conversation where someone's like, yeah, so I have this really cool, backyard, and blah, 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 and they just talk about themselves and how cool they are. Like, no one wants to talk to that person. Don't bring that person in business. So that's what I try to help people do, is how do we shift that? So instead you're talking about how cool your customer is, what is their journey, and how can you fit into their story as a guide, not as a hero. So that's when people hear of storytelling, when I tell them that's what I focus on, they're like, oh yeah, actually I have a really cool story and maybe you could help me tell it. I'm like, no, no, no. No, that's starting off on the wrong path, because you don't want to talk about your story. No one cares. What we need to talk about is the customer's story, because that's what the customer wants to talk about. And if you're talking about them, they're going to be interested. That means more money for you. So that's really where I help people kind of, change their messaging. And that's where I begin. I mean, the whole story brand framework is a lot more than that, but the biggest shifts in perspective are changing your hero to be the customer, not yourself, and making yourself the guide. So there's a lot more to it, but that's the framework that I use, and it's the best that I found for a storytelling framework. Because the storytelling's been around for ages, but this framework does a really good job of clarifying and providing structure to your marketing.
Wow. And I mean, just so beautifully broken down. I mean, just off top of hand, we work with a lot of nonprofits. And so telling a story is so critical. And I would definitely say that's a very large vertical where they engage. And we do user experience, like group testing with people to figure out, how your ideal customer or audience or whomever that may be that you're looking to pull in and attract, how do they absorb information, and how can we make sure that that information represents your brand in the best capacity? So thank you so much for beautifully breaking that down.
Of
um,
course, yeah.
and so I guess a question here is, how can businesses clarify their message to instantly connect with customers and visitors?
That's a great question. There's a lot to do. There's a whole process that you need to go through, but if you want to really break it down to the most important things, it all begins with the problem that you solve and who you solve it for. If you really understand those two things, then you are a lot further along than most people. And it's harder than it sounds because most people, they think of their problem and they think of something very on the nose, like high level. But a lot of the time, our problems that we're solving for people are not just the most obvious. There's deeper levels to what you're solving for someone, kind of like in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, what are you actually solving for them? For example, a financial advisor, you would think he's solving the problem of, you know, finances, but a lot of the time, what they're actually solving for is peace of mind. It's safety, security, having those as the primary products that you're selling is that feeling of safety and security. So thinking of it a bit deeper like that, really nailing down your problem and also how you present your solution to that problem. So that's really where I begin, is figuring out what that is. And then the other hard part of that is cutting the rest of it, which also sounds easier than it actually is, because you want your story that you're writing here to be one thread. So your problem has to be mirrored to your solution, and that solution has to be mirrored to you, the guide. So everything is linked. And what I've seen a lot of the time, and this is very natural for people to do, is they try to stuff as many pieces of information in there because they feel like it's missing something. It's too simple. But no, like, you need to make it simple for people to understand, because this is something I think about a lot. When you talk to someone or you hear them talking, you only absorb 20% of what they say. And from that 20%, even a smaller percentage do you actually remember. So that makes it so much more important to put something on the page that people only put on the page that you need them to know. Don't put anything else on there. So that's really what I mean with clarifying your story and your message, is narrowing down the problem, the solution. So you're only talking about one thing. And I know that's a little bit theoretical. So if you don't mind, I can give you an example of of what I did.
Example.
Um,
Yes.
so I was talking, I was advising someone on, there's a lot of AI companies coming out now, and this guy, he creates AI agents to complete tasks for businesses, and they're basically like digital people, digital workers that can do stuff on their own. And his sales deck was like 40 pages long with detailed breakdowns of everything that every single different AI agent does. And I was looking through this like, how is someone supposed to absorb all this information? And all these offers, like, yeah, we can do HR, and these AI agents, they can do IT, and and so many different offers. And looking at it, I was like, what what do most people come to you for? What are they most interested in? And immediately he said, "Oh, it's the lead generation." I was like, "Well, there you go. Focus on that." So it's kind of comes back to the 80-20 rule. If 80% of your success and leads and money is coming from one thing, focus on that. And the rest, you don't need to over explain everything because then you're just losing out on potential income. Even though it feels like the opposite, it feels like oh, if I don't put it in, people are not going to know about it. They don't need to know about it at that stage. You're just trying to get them through the door. And once they've swiped their credit card and they understand your one main offer, then you can introduce everything else. Everything is in a step-by-step system. You don't need to explain every single thing at once. And I found that to be the case with what I focus on. So I focus mainly on pitch decks and like homepages, and those key elements of your business is when you really need to only focus on the things that people need to understand in that first phase of their interaction with you. If you start going off on the deep end of specs and details and all this other stuff, then you're just going to scare them off and confuse them before they actually understand your main core offer.
So this is kind of funny because that's kind of the opposite of what we do for SEO. So
Mhm.
search engines are the more content, the better, the more
Yeah.
quality content, the better. So it's kind of funny how we conflict there. But how it translates, how, my opinion, how it translates for web design is having very simple landing pages. So like
Mhm.
if you're doing a paid ad, you direct them to a standalone landing page that has no clutter, no additional links to go anywhere else. It's not
Mhm.
distracting. This is the offer. This is how you sign up. Click here, done. There's no footer links. There's no navigation. There's no, here's the 20 other services that we offer. This is the offer. And so that's how we do that in web design. But in order to get discovered and show up in search results, the rest of their website needs to have a lot of good content and a lot of information and blogs that go into the weeds, because that's how people are going to find you if you search for something. So I just think it's kind of funny, for your pitch deck and for landing pages, when you're going in for the close or the conversion, totally agree with what you're saying. But if you need to get found in the first place, if you're looking for SEO, it's like kind of the opposite.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's an interesting observation because I think that's also why I don't jive well with SEO. And I've told you this before. Like it's so hard to wrap my head around it because I think the opposite way. I'm like,
Right.
cut it down. But yeah, like that's really what I focus on though is how do we design and craft messaging for humans. So anything outside of that, that's not my expertise at all. I don't know how to design for robots as well. I mean, I know how to optimize a homepage, the basics for SEO, but the nitty gritty when we get down to like what the robots need and want to really get found, and that's a whole other skill set.
Right, right.
Yeah, and I think just to also piggyback on that, it's so interesting that you really lean into the homepage design and the sales deck when a lot of the times those are the first two ways people are looking at you. Google describes your homepage as being your front door. And
Hmm.
whenever you're driving through a really nice neighborhood, we're looking at the front of the house. So
Yeah.
is your front door clear? Is it eye-catching? Is it unique? All of these things that we tie into web design that are really people's first impression of your business. And then from growing the business, having a very clear and concise messaging that matches your sales deck is the first asset that we really provide people in becoming a customer. So both of those are two very important realms in regards to branding, and you want to make sure that it's streamlined. And to your point, we're not regurgitating information on people, right?
Exactly, exactly. I think that's also where I found my sweet spot. You said you said it perfectly. That's two things. They're basically the same thing. I like to call a homepage essentially just a vertical pitch deck
Right.
because you
Hmm.
still need to explain the same things. Of course, it's different, but that is why I think I found my home here in this space is because it fits so perfectly with what I enjoy working on and what I'm uniquely qualified to do.
Yeah.
So if our listeners are thinking, okay, I need a good story, what is some general advice we could give them? How do they come up with that story? Do they survey their clients? What do they do?
Yeah, starting with data is always the best bet. That's always when you can get pretty interesting insights. And so once you have a good understanding of your people, then it allows you to craft very specific messaging for your target audience. And the more specific you can get that messaging, the better. If you're talking to everyone, you're talking to no one. So you really have to nail down who you're speaking to. Um, the more specific, the better. For example, this was a fake project, but it's still a great example. I when I was getting certified for Storybrand, they have you do some sample projects, and one of the projects was crafting messaging for a water bottle, which there's there's very many water bottles out there in the world you can buy. So what I did is I crafted messaging for a water bottle, but it was a water bottle designed for a pilot, and I decided to go with that as opposed to just a general water bottle because you can make the messaging so much more specific to them and get them to say, I need that, which is the goal for any time I'm making messaging for someone. I want the audience to look at it and resonate with it strongly. And the only way to make that message really strong is to make it specific to that person. You have to talk to them, and it's almost like you're writing a love letter to them. You never write a love letter to whom it may concern. you know? So
Right.
starting with a point of like you have to know who you're speaking with, and that makes a very specific message. And everyone's story is going to be different, but that really is the first step in crafting a story is you have to understand who you're speaking to.
Mm. Always know your audience in every aspect. So, if someone is starting a new business, where do you recommend that they start when crafting either a sales deck or a homepage for maximum impact?
When you're starting a new business, the temptation is always to talk to everyone. And so it makes the messaging difficult, which at that point, you don't really know who you're talking to, so it's hard to nail down. So the best way to really figure that out is start with one segment of people and try it. Because the only way that you will know if it works is if you try. And that's really what I did when I started my business. And this was about 10, 11 months ago now is I started speaking to a lot of people. My messaging is it was so hard to craft my own messaging. It made me question myself so much. I was like, I do this for other people, but I can't do it for myself. But
Right.
part of that was not understanding what I wanted to do because I was like, I want to do logo design question mark. So it really takes a lot of experimenting. So start with one segment of people, test it, see if it feels right. If it doesn't, pivot until you get to the right uh, messaging, which you will. It takes some trial and effort, and some people are scared to do that because they're like, oh, what people are gonna think I'm weird if I keep changing who I'm talking to. No one's looking at you, okay? you know, no one cares. So just try it because eventually you will find it, and then you'll become known for that. But there's really no better way to find out than just doing it, just trying.
Absolutely. I know we're going to get you talking about your success stories and some common misconceptions. So, I guess one more question I have, in regards to business owners or people who are, on the board of a nonprofit or anyone that is in charge of an organization or their marketing or their website. How can people tell when their messaging is holding them back? And I guess the second part to that question is what can they do about it?
The biggest indicator of when your messaging is holding you back is when people are confused. If you have to over explain and it takes you a long time to explain what you do, then that's not a good thing. You should be able to explain what you do in one sentence and people quickly understand. That's one of the hardest things to do in messaging is how do we say that so quickly and so easily? And people can spend months figuring out what their one liner is. But in order to craft that, you just need to first understand what the problem you're solving, the solution, and the results. So that's usually what I like to fit in that one liner. But that is, yeah, that's the main issue that I see is um, people don't understand how to craft their messaging, and so it becomes just this confusing mess. And another indicator of poor messaging is if you're stressed about it. So I've talked to so many business owners that are just like, I don't know, I could say this, I guess, I don't know. And then you just keep flip-flopping. If you keep flip-flopping, imagine how difficult it is for, your audience to understand what you do. Um, so yeah, the best way to combat that is just to like take a few steps back, honestly get someone to look at it, someone that's not in your circle, because if they are struggling, someone outside of your bubble, then you need to be able to explain it in a way that they can understand, not just your industry lingo. Don't try to sound cute or clever in in your messaging.
Right.
um, People often like to put your journey starts here, something like that on their website. And it's like, what do you sell? And it's so funny, but it's true that the header is so important. And I'd say like 80% of websites that I see don't mention what they sell on the header, which is like, what? That's usually the place people stay for a few seconds, and they decide to click off on that one header. So you have to make sure it's really solid in the header. You have to make sure you explain what you do, why it matters, and how to buy, and who you're speaking to as well. So if you have those things in the header, then you're solid. But that's where I begin when crafting messaging.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, that you broke that down so beautifully. And I always mention this, and maybe sometimes people think I'm a little crazy, but I always say your new hire is like your biggest asset because they are the
Hmm.
freshest set of eyes on your business. And if they have questions about what it is and what we do, then that to me is like, okay, little indicator that our messaging is off, like it should be very clear and concise. So, yeah, thank you so much for breaking that down.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I've not heard that said that way before, but it is very true. Your new hire to look at it. For me, my biggest asset is my husband. He's my guinea pig. He tests all my messaging for me because he's a pilot, and hence the water bottle thing. I that's why I did that. But yeah, my husband's a pilot, and for him, his mind works so differently than mine. He's
Mhm.
more like engineer, like really technical focused. I'm more like whimsy, art, let's go, let's make it fun. And so to have someone completely like opposite of my thinking look at the messaging and understand it immediately, that's when I know I've done it. So
Right.
I really, he's my first guinea pig.
Ah, that's so smart.
That's great. I saw on LinkedIn the other day you have some exciting news. You just started a new partnership.
I did, yeah. So I partnered with Seed to Table. We still have our two separate businesses, but our interests really align and we have so much synergy that it just made sense to partner. And that's really exciting for me because they are really breaking the mold on what it looks like to attend a pitch event. So usually, and I don't know if you've ever been to one of these events, a pitch event tries to invite as many people as possible. It's this big bloated event. People come, they pitch, and it's forgettable, and investors come for a free lunch and they leave. So Seat to Table is really spinning that around, and they're doing the opposite in many ways, which I think is really fun. I love when people are bold and they decide to break the mold. Oh, that rhymes. But yeah, they decided instead of inviting everyone, no, they're going to make it very highly curated. So put a cap about 120 people for each event. They invite only the investors that are aligned with the startups that they are inviting to speak. So if it's a life science event, only life science investors and only life science startups are coming. So it's really like a matchmaking service, if you will. So they are really upping the funding rate at most than like it's much higher than most of these other events because they've figured out the perfect formula to get startups funding. And I love that because my biggest goal is I want to see entrepreneurship flourish in America and in my community. I think it's one of the best things we can do for this country is to get people um, starting businesses and not afraid to start businesses. So that's I really align with their mission, and I want to help them increase their funding rate and make it easier for people to start businesses, be bold, take risks, and have this exciting journey that we're starting on. Everyone has their own, but what I am joining them on is I'm going to be redesigning most of their pitch decks. So whenever they need like that, those key redesigns, and I'm going to come in and redesign the pitch decks for all of their startups that need that extra help. So I'm super excited about that, and it's so fun to be a part of this community. And that's what I've been working on recently, is just redesigning all these confusing pitch decks.
Wow, that
That sounds
sounds,
really fun. It's like
yeah.
Mhm.
Sounds like
Shark
something
Tank
we'd see
sort
off of
of,
TV.
but
Exactly.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I love Shark Tank. That's like my one of my favorite shows, and
Mhm.
so that's a new goal of mine. I'd love to see one of the startups that I help to get on Shark Tank. I don't know if that'll ever happen, but that would be so fun, and we'll see. I mean, this Siege to Table is growing very quickly. They're having events all over the country, and they're even planning to fly me out to these events so I can go and network and
Cool.
all this. So it's an awesome opportunity for me to grow my brand and also rep them as well. And I'm super excited for that.
Well, congratulations. That sounds like an
Yeah.
amazing opportunity for you and so fun too.
Congrats.
Thank you.
And I know, how we all got introduced to each other is with being involved with the Raleigh Chamber and the North Raleigh
Mhm.
Chamber. And, very much like this podcast today, just having a conversation with you and just seeing the fulfillment fill your body and being excited and talking about everything from your mission to the actual breakdown of how you help someone break through in their messaging and improve that.
Hmm.
So this conversation, among many others we'll have in the future, I know has just been so enlightening. And thank you so much.
Yeah, you have great energy.
Oh, thank you.
So, Versaviya, if anyone listening would like to work with you or has a follow-up question for you, how can they reach out?
I am very active on LinkedIn, so you can find me on there, Versaviya Despars, or you can visit my website, pivotbranding.co, not .com, co. You can find me there, and I'd be happy to chat, even if it's just to give us some advice or take a quick peek at your deck or your homepage. Yeah, happy to help. And like I said, my mission is to help entrepreneurs, so that if there's something that you need help with, I'm more than happy to chat with you.
I
Awesome.
love.
Well, so much. And then also don't forget to check out our resources at thedigital.com and also on our YouTube channel. We have lots of videos and how-tos about digital marketing, web design, e-commerce, and basically just how to grow your business. So thank you so much for your time and for listening, and we'll see you next time.